Good deals. Jimmy Doane Show.
Hey, hey, hey.
Here with Counselor Curtis.
Hey, y'all.
And we're going to, today is the 26th.
Yep.
Monday debate night.
Happy birthday, T.
Yes. Tiffany.
Mm-hmm.
I love you, honey. I should have sent her something, but she got already ready.
Sending you a good happy birthday wish right now.
Yeah, there you go. Right. So anyway, tonight is debate night. I don't know if you really want to chat too much about it because,
well,
it starts in about, 3 hours.
Yeah. Everybody knows what's on tap. We'll discuss it tomorrow if we.
Right. That's probably the best idea is to do a post-mortem rather than try and guess.
Right.
Everybody has their own guess. So.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time.
Is that when it starts?
Mm-hmm.
Ah.
Yeah, it's late.
Oh, yeah, it is late. Okay. Well, that'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I got a few things that we can talk about.
Sure.
Other than that, we're going to have an update, a little bit of an update on the automatic cars, self-driving, whatever, autonomous.
Right.
Here's a thing that says Uber plans self-flying drone taxis to beat the city traffic.
Right.
Now, I tell you the truth, I don't think that's going to fly.
What?
Fun.
Why not?
Because once you have the self-driving cars,
you won't need them. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's just way overkill. I mean, you're going to get through. You're going to get through the traffic as fast as you can get anyway. And
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, this will be for the executives. The Donald Trumps and the Ben Bernankes and whoever. They'll be flying from rooftop to rooftop.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe flying from their rooftop out to a real airport.
Yeah, and exactly.
Like
and before they take the jet to the Hamptons or whatever.
Well, of course, as it is right now, they just put a helicopter on. They don't need a self-driving something.
Yeah, but I think it'll be a lot more cost-effective, I would imagine, for the drones to fly. Right?
Well, it's interesting you should mention this because there is I'm going to tell you here, of course, they're working on this stuff. They got the concept down and everything like that. The Taxi Hailing Act is working on technology that would allow airborne passenger drones to fly users short distance around the cities. It has emerged, raising the prospect of a future which skylines are dotted with Uber aircraft shuttling commuters back and forth. As I say, I don't see it.
I do. I mean, you think about the difference in the toys and toys are like porn. Toys are one of the driving forces in the technology, and now you see every Christmas there's a kiosk at the mall with a whole bunch of little robot flying machines that pretty much fly themselves. They all self-stabilization. That's all figured out.
Yeah, and they all return home if they start to run out of juice.
Well, they know what to do at this point, so it's just a matter of linking it into the GPSs and coordinating them all. I think what you'll see is a bunch of courier drones before we start to see passenger drones.
Right.
They'll take mail and important documents and medical equipment and things like that. Yeah. And they'll be launching and flying around and stuff like that way before you see people up there, I think.
Right. Well, again, you have a weight restriction, obviously. I mean,
right.
It's like medical supplies. You could take 10 or 15 pounds.
Exactly.
Not a 200-pound guy.
Exactly.
So anyway, the helicopter Ubers. They're talking about using VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing with fixed wings, and it says here, enabling them to fly silently. Well, I don't know about that. So anyway, Holden said Uber wanted to offer our customers as many options as possible to move around, and that technology should be available within the decade. And of course, as we said, I think it's going to be a little sooner than that.
Yeah, well, and the noise comes from the cavitation, right? Mostly, and the engine itself. So if they
all electric.
Exactly, they get electrical, they're still going to have to deal with the cavitation, though, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, stuff blowing up or something like that?
Well, just the sound of the propellers moving through the air creates
you're
going to hear that kind of stuff. I mean, it's going to be a lot quieter than the helicopters are.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But
well, anyway, it says while the idea may seem far, this is what kind of gets kind of interesting. Uber's not the only one researching passenger drones. Earlier this year, EHang, a Chinese company, unveiled the 184, an autonomous quadcopter drone designed to carry a single passenger. With a battery life of 23 minutes, the 184, which has been slated for release as early as this year, is expected to cost about $300,000.
23 minutes. That doesn't get you far.
Well, it depends on the speed and where you're going. I mean, again, that could certainly get you out from the rooftop to the airport.
Could. I mean, yeah, and they'll increase the battery life on those pretty fast, but that increases the weight pretty dramatically as well.
So you're going to have to. The only people that can fit in this are 100-pound women.
Right. That's for a little while. It's going to be jockeys and
Yeah,
stuff.
right. Exactly. So anyway, it'll be interesting. 300,000. So Larry Page has invested a whole lot of money. However, and this is what I like. However, filling our skies with passenger drones within 10 years is an ambitious undertaking and would require hundreds of new pages of regulations.
Of course.
I mean, not to mention consumers who would be willing to
Not
put
in
their
China,
life,
though.
Yeah, right, exactly. Willing to put their life in the hands of small self-flying aircraft, and presumably be incredibly costly to develop. Well, those are stupid things, because a lot of stuff costs a whole lot of money to develop. I mean, the rockets the private rockets that they're doing right now are costing hundreds of millions. I mean,
Yeah, at least, yeah.
and that's just to start. And so anyway, but the other thing is, hundreds of pages of new regulations. I mean, right away, bang, it's stunning, because you have to sit down and start writing regulations about something that really doesn't exist yet. And you have to get
according to everybody,
look into the future.
People love regulations still. We're in regulatory golden age right now. Nobody can even say something like legalize marijuana without saying the words "and regulate it" right after that. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how accepting everybody is of regulations. They just love the concept that there's this benevolent ruler that makes everything safe, and without those people, like we said before, they'd just be flying these drones into windows and stuff and smashing people all up and killing people left and right, because obviously nobody cares about safety except for the regulators.
Right. So when we talked about that, I think the other day too. Well, this brings up two other points that are kind of interesting. The one, I don't have the article here, but it was kind of a human interest thing. This guy, I forget where it was. He had like a whole bunch of Trump signs in his yard, and the city ordinance was no more than 36 square feet, and he had like 300 square feet of Trump signs. So they came out and warned him. They said, yeah, right. Apparently they haven't actually cited him yet, but the response
cited him in. You mean?
Yeah, right, exactly. The response was all his neighbors and friends showed up with Trump signs on his lawn, which is not illegal.
Right, right.
So they're all standing around waving, and of course the motorists driving by, there's, shall we say, mixed reactions depending on for whom you are,
right,
and that sort of thing. And so, that's his way around, as we do here on the parking. We take donations.
What? Shut the.
Okay. So anyway, then of course you come up with something like this along the same lines, and this is called a homeless Winnipeg artist stops selling paintings after police issue him a ticket.
Yeah.
A Winnipeg man who once sold his artwork on a street corner says he has little choice, and this is, like you say, this is accepting, okay? Little choice but to return to panhandling after he says police ticketed him and told him he needed to buy a permit to sell his paintings on the sidewalk. He's a homeless guy. Jamie Hogeboom lives and this is in Canada, but still, he lives in a shelter, and he says he simply doesn't have the money to pay for the $300 license. This is the sidewalk vendor's license that protects the people.
Sure.
$300. Now, rather than displaying his art for sale, he spends his day on a handmade sign and a cup. He said apparently his paintings are pretty good, but he said he lives in and out of shelters, has been unable to work after a gambling addiction, and severe depression left him broke. He spent his first night on the street at age 50 and began sleeping in shelters 2 years ago. Then the Canadian television profiled this guy in June when a local studio began showcasing his artwork publicly and providing him with a space to paint. His art off, and I've seen his pictures of his art. It's good stuff. It looks pretty good to me. I don't know why. He says he was selling his postcard-sized prints. He was selling them for $5 donation. And so they said he was making apparently he sold 10 a day, about $50 a day. But now he says he's back to earning about $10 a day from panhandling. So anyway, the city, of course, says that the city said this guy Hogaboam is considered a mobile vendor, and that he needs a proper license to operate.
Sure.
I mean, this is the city that protects you, and protects him, no doubt.
Sure.
So, and here's one of the thing, there's some advocate for this guy, and they say, this, as we've talked about before, this is hardly what you call a good resource for the police people.
Yeah.
To be handing out tickets for somebody selling painting. I mean, this hardly rises to a Muslim terrorist death threat or suicide bomber or something.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Hogaboam says he will continue panhandling until he decides if he can make enough to afford the $300 permit. He's going to buckle.
Well, wait, he can't do anything about it. There's nothing he can do except for what he's doing, like you said.
He has a court appearance scheduled in mid-October regarding the ticket. So again, apparently he has to pay the ticket, and then whatever that's going to be, probably a chunk, $50, $60 or something, and then he has to get a $300 permit. Here's a homeless guy that's almost making it on his own, and
not anymore.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
It's just this licensing has got way beyond. I was reading something the other day that said the number of licenses since the 50s that are required have more than tripled.
Oh my God! I would expect it to be more than 30 times as many.
Maybe it's more than. Yeah, it's a lot more. I know that, but because licensing was almost inconsequential, for major stuff.
Yeah.
But hair braiding, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, hair, nails, and like we talked about before, psychics. I can pull up the old psychic licenses that we've got from the other show. It's just unbelievable how licensing has just been completely accepted. It's just there it is. You got to have a license for everything, except you don't have to have a license to enforce licensing.
Right.
You don't have to have a license
to dispense the license.
Right, exactly. There's no licensing bureau.
No.
So it's just whatever the authorities deem to be necessary of licensing, which is everything. Yeah. And I saw the other day one on Facebook where a guy went and bought a couple of hundred pizzas and brought them to a homeless shelter to give them out to people. And same thing, they shut him down because he didn't have a license to distribute the food. And it's unbelievable. It's your papers, please.
Yeah.
Where are your papers? Your papers, please. Go back and watch some of those World War II shows, and you'll see exactly where licensing leads to. Your papers are not in order.
Yeah.
You do not have, the papers. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, and somehow it is still just 100%. The ball is picking up steam. It's still rolling.
Yeah.
So
it is kind of interesting because I know that when I went into business some time ago, they were trying to figure out what kind of business I was going to fit in because they'd never heard of it before. So they made something up. I mean, they said, "Well, we're
right
over here in this category."
Yeah. Doctor.
Yeah,
Sounds like doctor.
Yeah, right. So,
what's the most expensive license we can charge this guy for?
Boy, isn't that the truth? And of course, that's it happens all the time. It's a real tragedy, and maybe someday I'm wondering how eventually you could get rid of the licensing stuff. I mean,
the last time it collapsed was under the weight of the competition, when the British mercantile empire succumbed to the Indian loom weavers and such.
Right. Okay,
and so one thing we could get is you could have a situation where China just blows off all their licensing, and all of a sudden they're getting ahead because people don't have to get things cleared. And I just saw another thing about the EpiPen today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a senator or congressman was railing against the senators
I saw the headline.
Yeah, and he said, look, it's you guys that make this thing cost $300 to $600 because it costs that much to get something cleared, for them to get a license to distribute the stuff. The stuff costs 99 cents, like you said before, to put in the pen. But it's not only a regulated substance, but the delivery method is regulated, and so you got to have a license for all that stuff.
Everything all down the pipeline.
That's
right?
it.
Everybody has to be licensed. It's almost like the VAT, the value-added tax.
Exactly.
Everybody in the food chain has to have a license.
That's it.
Right.
Or the highwaymen will come descend on you.
Boy, isn't that the truth? Yeah, and they'll nail you. Well, again,
the guy's lucky he didn't get beat with a stick. If he was in America, the 50% chance he would have gotten whacked.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's right. The Canadians are a little more friendly.
Yeah.
But still, it's just amazing. Yeah, it's just interesting that they licensed this guy, vendor on the street. Okay, so moving along.
Okay.
Well,
We're back.
We're back. Okay, Jimmy Doane Show here with Counselor Curtis.
Hey, y'all.
Jimmy Doane here, and today is the 26th. This is debate day, as we're not going to talk about it because tomorrow we will chime in with the rest of them on our take,
That's
which
right.
no doubt will be a better take than anybody else. This is another loss of our freedoms. This is kind of interesting. After the New York attack, which is what was there, that was
The Chelsea bombing.
the Chelsea bombing, right?
Oh, don't say bombing. Yeah, right.
Okay, right.
The Chelsea gas expansion device.
Yeah, right, exactly. So anyway, after the New York attack, Congress wants TSA now to ramp up and secure Amtrak and the buses, trains and buses.
Right.
The bill pushing the agency to focus more on surface transport follows a critical report on an attempted bombing near a train station. U.S. Transportation Security Administration is one of those federal agencies that tends to inspire intense reactions among the traveling public. It's a bureaucracy that interacts with millions of passengers each day, requiring their shoes, their jackets, laptops, and of course time.
Yeah.
That's the big killer, is the time.
Right, exactly. That's what I was going to mention is, well, a few different things about this. From my perspective, number one, buses. Of course, when the self-driving cars come around, bye-bye buses.
Right.
Because it's going to be too easy to get from one place to another.
Right.
Number two, railways, they're already a dinosaur.
Right.
And just supported by government subsidies. It's, maybe there's a few corporations which need to transport large amounts of heavy stuff through the country.
That they do.
And those should be made to pay the cost.
Right.
As opposed to all of us with the subsidies.
Right. I don't know how. I know that it occurs to me that the one private railroad that crosses the northern United States is called something Union Pacific, I think, is a profit-making, independently owned. It's the only one.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the only one at this point. And then the TSA. What's their record of stopping stuff? It's nothing.
It's zero.
It sucks.
Yeah.
It's awful. It's terrible. And you look at when they do the tests, something like 90% of the weapons get through. They fail miserably at doing everything except for inhibiting our efficient travel. And their budget is $7 billion a year or something.
And they want to ramp it up. They said they're underfunded.
Right, of course. And of course, nobody that I know has any other feeling for the TSA except for hate.
Contempt, at least.
Exactly. And so they want more of that?
Actually, that's not true. I actually saw one or two people say they're keeping us safe. I mean, these are just zombie people.
Well, I'm sure that if we got one in your family or something that you want to believe that they're
Well, that's true. That's
keeping
true.
us safe.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Son, daughter, husband, wife, whatever. Yeah, they're keeping
Sure.
us safe. You got to justify your.
They're doing a job.
Yeah, they are. Well, what's interesting, it says here only 2% of TSA's funding goes to surface transportation, according to the Inspector General, and Congress is looking to change it. The TSA, of course, when you see what else they do, I was listening to a guy's podcast the other day, and he said he took a flight, and he had what was it? He had something. It wasn't toothpaste. It was something that came in a tube, and it was like an 8-ounce tube, but it was half empty. It was empty basically. It was still confiscated.
Right.
Because it was a 8-ounce tube.
Right.
They're mindless.
Yeah.
They're just mindless.
Well, it's crazy. I went over to the game last week or the week before, and there's a bunch of people walking around with these clear plastic bags,
Right.
Okay, because that's the only thing that's allowed in the stadium these days.
We talked about making them. We talked about that right off the bat about going up there with a bunch of plastic bags, make some money.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what's crazy is I'm looking at like girls walking around with a clear plastic purse, and you can see all their money sitting right there.
Yeah.
I mean, if that isn't an incentive to rob,
Yeah.
I don't know what is. You can see their cell phone. You know exactly what you're going to get when you rob them. It's crazy, and yet. For as far as I know, there hasn't been a single incident ever of anybody bringing anything dangerous into the stadium.
Yeah.
And yet every weekend we have these big inspections, and you see people yelling at them, and I mean it's a quality of life issue as far as I'm concerned.
Interesting you should mention that, because our glorious leaders down here are always talking about how they're improving the quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is, hard to measure.
It's hard to measure, but when you see that they're forcing a bunch of people to change their natural behavior,
Right.
you know it's costing them time and money and convenience just right off the bat.
If they say, "What the hell is this?" That is an obvious indicator that the quality of life at that instant is not as great as you think.
Exactly.
So anyway, they're going to apparently go do this stuff. Moreover, Congress is unlikely. Has the will or the wherewithal to fund any massive increase in TSA personnel, already stretched thin this year to handle airport staffing and budget cuts. And, airline passengers experienced extreme delays at many of the largest airports.
Yeah, you saw that one line where the guy actually filmed the line.
Right.
And it went on for like a half a mile
Yeah.
inside the airport.
And outside.
Yeah, and that just how the powers that be can tolerate that kind of delay is just mind-boggling. I mean, I can't understand why there aren't more people just at the office just beating the doors down saying, why don't you change this, fix this somehow, get the hell out of the way and let us get on the plane. I did notice that Donald Trump brought up profiling, and Lionel brought up profiling the other day. Yeah. And it was great. He said, look, there's a big difference between racial profiling and profiling. Yeah. And you make the distinction. And you have to profile to some degree. I mean, if you see somebody walking around in a big coat in the middle of summertime and they got stuff poking out on all sides and wires and stuff like that, and I mean you get suspicious, and rightly so. That's okay. And you can, this is the here, maybe we have a caller. We'll see. Jimmy Doane Show.
Hey, is this Curtis?
Yes, it is. Is this?
Hey, man.
It's Engineer Eric.
Your 1911, is that stainless?
This doesn't sound like a show call, but yes, it is.
Okay. Are you guys doing a show?
Yeah, right now. I'll call you back about that.
Alright. Okay, brother. You got
Okay,
it.
bye-bye.
That's what happens when you have a dedicated line.
That's right.
It says Amtrak would not be required to use the TSA watch list or other resources, but the bill would force TSA to give the rail operator access to the secure flight program within 6 months if Amtrak directors requested it. And of course, the Congress now is trying to put together a policy that says a comprehensive policy that helps keep the passenger rail service secure.
Sure, you wouldn't want it to be non-comprehensive.
Yeah, it's going to be comprehensive like it is now. Where 98% of the stuff gets through.
Right.
To get on an airplane.
And I've told the story before. For the last 10 years, I left a lighter, a Bic lighter, visible in the mesh pocket of my carry-on bag, and have traveled internationally, nationally, all over the place. Never, ever been stopped for that. They've taken other lighters from me,
yeah.
But the one that you can see as I'm walking up in the mesh pocket, apparently if you put whatever it is that you're trying to smuggle at the edge of your bag, the scanners have a hard time seeing it because of the excess material.
Right.
And so, and zippers and things like that. So it's just ridiculous. It's insane. Also, I'll just point out, if you want to be on the show,
Yeah, right.
you can call into this number that's up here, and that phone will ring, and we'll
As it
put
just did.
as it just did, and we will put you on the show, and you can tell us where to go or do whatever.
Okay, well, I'm done with the TSA, so is everybody
Yeah.
else, I think.
Oof, man. And we're back.
And we're back. Jimmy Doane Show with Counselor Curtis.
Hey, y'all.
Debate day. This is September 26, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
The next item that I caught was the last leverage left with Cuba.
Aha.
What this is an editorial from the Miami Herald, and they are talking about the 50-year embargo. There were actually more than that, 57 years or something we've had an embargo. It got ramped up, I think, even more in the 80s, but it started in the 50s.
The amazingly successful embargo.
Yeah, amazingly successful embargo. Well, the embargo on Cuba, one of the pillars of U.S. policy toward the island for more than half a century, now teeters on collapse, it seems, at least in terms of public support.
Oh, no.
Yeah, oh no, right. Well, this is, of course, when you start to think about what an embargo is, I mean, it's an act of war, number one.
Yeah.
It is what's interesting is that nobody else has an embargo. And
on Cuba?
On Cuba, Canadians, that's what you always
right.
do. If you want to go to Cuba, you go to Canada first, take a flight. No
right.
Now you might want to make sure you don't get your passport stamped.
Right.
I think it's okay now though with the loosening up. So anyway, the big deal, the Cuban American community. Of course, when I first got married to Miss Jimmy, we lived down in that neck of the woods. In fact, we were there when the first people started coming over, the Muriel boat launch or whatever it was, and they founded, the little Havana, and there was, at the time there probably wasn't more than a couple hundred people there.
Calle Ocho.
Yeah. So anyway, and they were hard workers, great guys, and everything.
Oh yeah, they had a couple of great friends. Hey Alex, hey Anja, Sergio.
So the point is though that of course it got kind of taken over by the Cubans almost, and they've always the Cubans that fled, of course, have always been upset because all their shit got taken.
Right.
And they want it back, and so they've held on for over half a century, and of course at some point, I was saying, give it up. I mean, you're not going to get it back.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to. I've noticed a few of my Cuban friends. Hey, Elio, by the way, saw you play drums the other day. It was great. I've noticed that a few of them have posted their objections to the opening up situation, and I'd like to get them on the show to find out what the objections are exactly, because they say something like we don't want to support the regime, and I guess the opening up. They're expecting money to go down there, and that will empower the regime, I suppose.
Well, the way the regime works, of course, when the Canadians or anybody else that wants to do trade with Cuba, you have to get a license from the Cuban government, and you pay them for everything. If you you don't hire workers, they hire the workers at $20 a week or whatever it is.
Right.
And so you pay the government, and they take the slice off the top. So
right.
That's one of the reasons that the living standards on so many of them have not increased, is because the government siphons off all the money for their own use.
Right. Well, we'll see how long that lasts.
Well, it will. That's all. So they wanted to eliminate the Cold War blockade launched by President Kennedy. A recent study takes note of the shift. According to a poll by Florida International University, the majority of Cuban Americans appear to want the embargo lifted. Now, when you think about it for a second, the people that fled Cuba, they're dying off. I mean, they're like going away. They're getting,
right.
If you fled when you were 30, you're now either 89 or dead or something.
It was 71, is that right? I think. Was the Mariel boat left?
I know it's 6. No, I think maybe it was 71. I don't know, but I mean before that there were a lot of Cubans that came.
Yeah. But that was the big 600,000 people in a few weeks or something.
Well, we went. Your mother and I, Mrs. Jimmy and I were down there before then. We were down there around the mid '60s, and they had started coming over. I don't know how exactly. Anyway, however, the Castro regime has yet to do much of anything to warrant the elimination of the embargo. The state of human rights remains abysmal. Freedom of expression is a non-starter, and democratic elections are nowhere near on the horizon. The latest outrage is Cuba's refusal to allow Cuban-American flight crews on U.S. airlines to overnight on the island. Now, as you know, they have scheduled flights now from
Yeah.
Tampa or something. Well, and sometimes, you know, they do the overnight thing, but they're not letting them, the Cuban American flight people overnight. They're big deal.
Right.
I mean, I don't know why you would call that the latest outrage. It's
Yeah.
just, you know, it's like a 90-minute flight or
Right.
something. So you turn around, you come back. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't get what the outrage is on this.
Yeah.
They're making it up. So anyway, they said and of course the Cuban Americans, the vast majority of them, have no knowledge of Cuba other than what their parents told them. I mean,
Right.
They've been born here.
Right.
For the last 57 years or whatever it is.
Right. Well, it's easy to find out. I mean, we know, after Batista, Castro took over, and he's been a horrible dictator for the last 50, 60
Well, it
years.
wasn't like Batista was any saint.
Right,
Why
right.
do you think that there was a revolution? That was
Right.
the whole point.
Right, right. But as we know, I mean, the United States was discovered by a boat that launched out of Havana, Ponce de Leon.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and it was a booming situation down there for a while until it all got shut down. And one of my grandfathers closed the FBI office there at the end of the decade in the 60s or whatever, 50s. But yeah, I mean, personally, I'd like to see it open up. Cuba's a fantastic geography.
Here's what I don't understand. This is one of those things that is, you know, that the glorious leaders of ours have decided that the rest of the 300 million of us have no right to go down there.
Yeah, I know.
And I'm sitting there, who elected you? Well, no, I didn't.
Yeah.
You know, and I disagree with your policy. So anyway, let me just finish up here.
Yeah.
About 75% of the survey participants think that the embargo has not worked at all or very well. Let's see, it was first imposed in October 1960 and went into full effect in 62. So do the math, whatever that is. You know, that's 54 years or something.
Right.
So anyway, since the December 17th, 2014, when President Obama announced his thawing of relations. However, the younger group, apparently there is some group that wants to maintain the Cuban Adjustment Act and the wet foot, dry foot policy, which many consider the reason for the recent waves of Cuban migrants trying to reach the United States across the central. And of course, people drown all the time. You know, this is another thing about the embargo is that
It kills people.
It kills people, right? So it remains. It says here in Cuba, the Castro regime remains mired in its own war and rhetoric tied to the bygone era of the Cold War. Well, okay, so that's their problem. Though the shift in Cuban American sentiment against the U.S. embargo of Cuba is an intriguing sign of the times, the shift that really matters is the one that Castro regime has yet to make. And you have to go back through this article to find out what that shift is exactly. I mean, human rights or something like that.
Right.
And the editorial ends with, this is what's disappointing. This is the editorial, and that alone mandates that the embargo remain in place. It's the only leverage that the United States has left.
Look, we know
there's no leverage at all.
No, exactly. We know two things. Number one, the embargo has impacted the Castro regime zero,
Right.
because he's still alive and in power, even at 92 or whatever he is. Number two, as we know from throughout history, the way to undermine a regime like that is through trade. What you do is you trade with the people. You let our people open up avenues, whatever they may be, so that their people become dependent and they gain a vested interest in trade with our people. And then all of a sudden, everybody down there becomes more empowered because of the extra money that's going there. And sure, some of it would go to the regime. Maybe the majority of it would go to the regime.
So what?
Exactly. My point is that you got to get the money, you got to get the stuff to the people. I've got the the picture of the cars pulled up behind you here.
Yeah.
And
They're from the 50s, and they're in unbelievable shape. I mean, they have had to keep them in pretty good shape.
yeah,
I mean, you know, they cannibalize everything you can imagine. So.
yeah.
But but you're right. The fact is that to me it's a so what. This is something actually that never should have been in the first place. Again, because it's an act of war, and you know everybody's trying to save face. We're still the evil Satan or whatever. At least the leaders are. And I don't see any reason to continue it. And I think what I've always said is the way these dictatorial regimes fade is just sort of what you said, and that is, blue jeans and soap.
Exactly. They get undermined by the middle class that grows up and gains power in all sorts of areas through their trade with the free people. And that's how we should approach all these regimes. Iran, whoever.
Well, in fact, we have seen. I mean, I remember when I went over in Europe the first time. They said, "Well, here's the one way you can help pay for your trip. You wear about 3 pairs of jeans over there,
right.
and you sell them, and they go for big bucks because they're so rare, and so they become the status symbol or something like that. The point being that once you get a hold of some of the free market stuff, that's what undermines the regimes.
I agree.
So as I say, I would never put the embargo in place in the first sense because it would have been.
That's contrary to our interests.
Right.
That it may, like I said, it may support the regime, but it also supports the people under the regime, and that's what we want to empower: is the people who are living there.
Well, there are some people, of course, that really don't want it lifted to get back with friends, and that's the sugar industry.
Yeah. The rum industry.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Rum. But the sugar industry is a big one because they used to be a big source of sugar and cheap compared to what we have to pay now because of the Fanguli brothers or whatever. And
I'd like to vacation there personally. I mean, I think it's such a cool geography, and I think I've said before that if you look through the history, the geological history, Cuba is an island that migrated through the Panama Canal at one point. It's from the Pacific.
Really?
Yeah, it's a totally different continental shelf than everything around here.
Really?
Yeah, and it moved up there. And it's great. It's got mountains and beaches and all kinds of cool stuff.
It's the largest island in the Caribbean by far. Mm-hmm. And it's huge. Really, it's pretty good size.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it must be at least the size of Florida, maybe.
No, not quite, but I would say 50,000 square miles or something.
Whatever. Anyway, but like you say, it would. And of course, this all started with little tyrant, as was Teddy Roosevelt, which was a guy that really screwed things up for Cuba during the 1898 Spanish-American War. Unfortunately, it's gone downhill ever since. That's over 100 years. All right, I'm done with that.
Okie doke.
I got my mojo working, baby, and I'm gonna try it on you. Oh yeah.
And we're back.
And we're back. Jimmy Doane Show here on the 26th of September, 2016. And Councilor Curtis.
Hello.
And I'm Jimmy Doane. So, and we're here. We got another little subject here. I'm not sure. I don't know if I alerted you to this particular one, but this is called. It's an editorial, a local editorial called "Keep Replica Guns from Children."
Ah, okay. No.
Okay. Well, what's happened is in the last, this is not anecdotal. I mean, there's been several times now where kids, 13, 6, 8, 10, whatever, have had replica guns and been shot.
Yeah.
Because the cops thought they were real. And so my question, the first question I ask is, what's changed in 50 years? I mean, when I was a kid, we all had replica guns. I mean, we had cap guns that actually bang, bang, bang.
Right.
It was cowboys and Indians. It was the outlaws and the bank robbers and everybody else. I mean, it was who didn't have a replica gun? Nobody cared. I mean, you went around, you wore it. You could take them to school. Hell, when I was growing up, you could take your gun to school. Nobody would say anything.
Right.
So the question is, what's changed? What significantly has changed now that a kid, a 6-year-old kid, now they did pass a law years ago that your replica guns are supposed to have a red tip.
Right.
But it just falls off. I mean.
Yeah, that's like the first thing that goes on the gun.
Right.
From my perspective, it's kind of simple. What's happened is our laws have become so strict. Our criminal laws have become so strict that we have pitted the police against normal, everyday citizens doing normal, everyday things.
Right.
And so what you have is a system where we send out law enforcement to all kinds of situations that we never would have sent them out to before.
Right.
So they're out there in the public, so they see that kind of stuff more. Also, when the public is subject to that type of law enforcement, it pisses them off.
Yeah.
And so then you get more blowback from the public, and then you get the police being more afraid of the public. They can't trust each other.
Mm-hmm.
The two become at odds, and then everybody's looking for the fight, so to speak. When you send the cops out to the hood, they're looking to see who's going to shoot at them.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they see a kid that's 13 but 6 feet tall, and he's got a gun, but it looks kind of like a cap gun, but enough like a real gun, they're just going to blast him.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's been this incredible escalation of violence.
Well, that's, I refer to it as the arms race.
It is.
I mean,
It
because
is.
Right now, the police are all dressed up like Fallujah people. I mean, they're battle. They're like the guys in Star Wars. All,
Full SWAT gear.
yeah, full to deliver a warrant or something.
Right.
I mean, it's just they're standing there with their battering ram and everything.
Right.
When and you hear it now again. It's anecdotal, I suppose, but you hear it time and time again that they got the wrong house, or even if it's the right house, the guy's not there or something. The 87-year-old grandmother gets it in the face with the spray stuff, or
Right.
tased or something.
And for serving an arrest warrant, I can see sending an armed person out there, because they're going to fight you. To some extent, it's friction. You got a problem. You're going to interdict somebody's liberty there, and so you might as well send somebody who's armed, who has the ability to force the person to come along.
Mm-hmm.
But for something like a traffic ticket,
Mm-hmm.
or a search warrant, or there's a million other things that we send out the cops
How about
for.
servicing somebody with a
Yeah,
summons?
Exactly. Summonses, and the sheriffs still do that all the time. Now,
Oh,
we
yeah.
do have private servers now,
Yeah.
but it should be almost entirely private servers.
Right.
I mean, we
You've
should
been
not be
served.
exactly. We should not be sending out armed police unless we expect some conflict, some real conflict.
Yeah.
And the escalation of that has.
Well, I got served by the sheriff's deputy one time, I remember, and she was all dressed up with body armor.
Sure.
I mean, I could see it was under her uniform, but she had a Kevlar doohickey under her to come to my house, and
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
So anyway, let me just go through the life ended. Let's see it. Ended up being a pellet gun. 12-year-old boy was shot to death in 2014, and he was playing. It ended up being a pellet gun. We had locally here. We had this Robert Detman was shot to death by officers who carried a replica gun in Southwest Gainesville apartment complex. 16-year-old. Last week, the grand jury found the shooting to be justified. Now, there's a lot of, no matter if it was or not, there's a lot of people that say it couldn't be. I mean, it just can't be.
Well, I don't know. That's one where I would agree with the police more or less. If somebody pulls out a replica gun, it should be interpreted as a hostile act, and you got to defend yourself in those situations. But there are so many situations like this recent shooting up on the side of the road. That
Shooting
guy.
up.
Yeah, right. Where it's just a traffic situation. We have traffic situations over and over again, which hopefully the Uber self-driving cars will begin to really cut into.
Yeah.
Because who are you going to arrest at that point?
Right.
Send the ticket over to Uber or whatever, and but don't send the armed guys up to Uber. Why would you do that?
You wouldn't. I mean, you wouldn't be able to anyway. Once you get fully autonomous roads and everything, how are you going to get there? I guess you send your anti-Uber car down there. Or whatever,
Well, I don't mind if they send a robot or a drone or a camera picture or an email or whatever it is. What you don't want to be doing is sending armed guys. People are fallible and they get frightened easily. And when they're carrying weapons, they know they're a lethal threat to you, and they know that you know that. And so it right away escalates the situation into territory where it doesn't need to be.
Well,
So-
the thing about it, you look at this, when here are the various enforcement people, worried about their life, and we've seen time and time again where somebody is sitting in the car and the guys pulled a gun on him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you
There's
think
one
he's
going
not-
around right now on the internet where the private investigator guy.
Yeah.
and the guy comes up and points a gun right at his head.
As a head,
And
puts his hand on that battery.
well, that'll be justified, and I think it was actually. That thing was from a little while ago. The post was, and all those cops got off.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's fine because
He was standing there with his gun for like what seemed like 2-3 minutes
Right.
before the other officers came up and said, back off.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, you're sitting there wondering, what is it about this that? And of course, there was the
Well,
other.
they're told, look, as soon as you start issuing commands, if the person doesn't follow every single command that you have, no matter how unreasonable or reasonable they may seem to be, get out, show me your hands, don't do this, do that, whatever it is, and they don't do the stuff, then you are supposed to interpret that as a hostile response and draw on them. So,
Well, this guy, and the one that's going around now, of course, both hands were visible.
right. Well, I thought it was funny that the thing that prompted the cop to draw the gun on him was when he pulled the earpiece out of his ear.
Right.
Right in the ear that's facing the cop. The cop can see what he's doing. It's not like he's pulling a bomb or a gun out of his ear or anything. He's pulling his ear plug out so he can hear you better.
Right.
I mean, that's practically an act of compliance. And yet that gets him drawn on. And to me, it seemed very clear that the cop that drew the gun on him just was upset that the guy wasn't kowtowing to him right away.
And he wasn't, of course.
Right, and he wanted to show his authority, and so he did, and that's the way that it goes. And it's a good thing the guy didn't get his head blown off. I mean, you have a gun like that. If it has a hair trigger and the guy is shaking a little bit, he could accidentally shoot your head off.
Sure. Yeah. Well, anyway, let me just see if there's any more in here that I want to talk about. What this editorial is saying is that they want now, and you can't just mark the replica guns. You want to make it illegal to sell any gun that's a replica gun of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
If it even look, or you can have toy guns, but they absolutely must not look at all, even remotely like, they got to look like one of those water guns,
right?
Or pink,
green and
orange,
pink,
yeah, right. Look-alike guns. Let's see. After a similar rash of high-profile police shootings of suspects carrying look-alike guns in the late '80s, I remember that. Congress passed a law requiring imitation firearms to have a bright orange plug in the barrel.
Well, it's a lot easier to go rob somebody with a replica gun that costs you $10 than it is to go spend actual money on a real gun. And so,
well, not only that, I would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine if you got caught, the charge might be different if you had a real gun versus...
Yeah, absolutely it is. Or it was.
Yeah.
Now it's not. Now I believe it's the same. Now they can, it's like a subjective test. Did the officer or the subject believe it was a real gun? Mm-hmm. And of course, what you do at this point is you take your real gun and you paint it pink and orange,
right,
and stuff like that. And then maybe you get an extra second to blast some people before they determine it's a real gun.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that. Good plan. Let's use that as a suggestion here from the Jimmy Doane Show. So anyway, he says keeping imitation firearms out of the hands of kids is easier said than done. And of course the thing is, they face a similar problem in federal law. Children can color the fakes to look like the real thing, and given the propensity for young boys to turn everything, including their sisters' Barbies, into fake guns, keeping imitation guns out of the kids' hands is problematic. So anyway, they want to keep the realistic weapons from children. Some stores already do their part, keeping BB and pellet guns in locked cages, so a clerk can check if the person is above 18 years old. Mm-hmm. It's a sad state of affairs when limits on replica guns are more likely than reasonable gun control measures, whatever that is. But if we can't keep real guns off the streets, the least we can do is keep the toy guns off the streets, which can be just as deadly. So that's...
to the person holding it.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So the point being that it's a fool's errand, I think, and it shows the collapse in our society to a large extent. That in the 50 years, or 60 years since I was holding a toy gun that looked very real, and nobody cared at all. You take it to school, and you could get water pistols back then that looked pretty real. Mm-hmm. And you start squirting people in your class.
That's a super Band-Aid on a huge wound, really.
Yeah.
They're not gonna get any headway in those situations until we de-escalate the violence.
Right.
And that has to start with the officials. It's the officials that are now overarmed and over intrusive into everyday people's lives. And I've said before, when you interdict a real criminal, they give up pretty fast. Versus if you interdict an average citizen, they get pissed off about it. Mm-hmm. And so,
well, of course, some of this stuff is also some people are dialing 911 for people that are mentally unstable. Mm-hmm. Well, right away, to me, there's no training apparently with the police officers. All their training is with shooting guns and not how to de-escalate a situation. And that's what they talked about. One of the things they talked about was in other countries. If you add up all the police